to the Get Fit with Jodelle podcast. I'm Jodelle as usual, and let's talk today about one of my favorite supplements, magnesium. But I can't do it alone. Georgi is back and so gracious with his time and his knowledge. So thank you, Georgi. And today we're discussing magnesium and the role it plays with hormones, with stress, with sleep, and much more. So I want to get your information, your knowledge, your expertise on this subject. So Georgi, first of all, thank you for being here. Magnesium has always been something I have put on the supplement list of every client virtually that I have met with, because it seems like so many people are low on it. And I kind of have an idea why, but I want to know, and I want you to divulge exactly why you see the importance of magnesium in supplementation of virtually everyone.
Yeah, magnesium is indeed very important, even according to mainstream medicine. If you type magnesium cofactor in Google, you'll get like, it's almost like a cliche. Almost every study on magnesium starts with the following line. Magnesium is one of the most important trace metals in the body. It participates in over 400 enzymatic reactions, and it's a required cofactor for these reactions to be able to occur. I don't know if any other metal comes even close to basically how ubiquitous magnesium is as a requirement in all these enzymatic reactions. And of course, without these enzymatic reactions, we can produce energy, can produce steroids, can really be energetic and functional as we want to be. And probably one of the most important enzymes where magnesium is a cofactor is the enzyme pyruvate dehydrogenase. And if that enzyme doesn't function, we basically cannot properly metabolize glucose. And if we cannot properly metabolize glucose, we're basically almost guaranteeing that our levels of lactic acid will rise. And lactic acid is this ubiquitous mitochondrial, I don't want to call it a toxin, but it's basically a signal of stress. And lactic acid by itself is a known tumor promoter. It's a known tumor initiator as well. And anything that promotes the synthesis and the elevation of lactic acid, it's really detrimental in the long run. So if you don't have enough magnesium, you won't be able to properly metabolize glucose, and your lactic acid levels will be elevated chronically. And symptoms of lactic acidosis, a mild version of it, it can be really dangerous. Actually, if it becomes a full-blown lactic acidosis, it can even be lethal. So people that have lactic acidosis, a severe one, immediately get sent to the hospital, and they get pumped full of so-called buffers like sodium bicarbonate, magnesium bicarbonate, anything to lower the acidity of the blood, because the organs become hypoxic, and because when you have too much lactic acid, you can't properly use oxygen. You can get the oxygen delivered to the organs. So there you go. Without enough magnesium, you can metabolize glucose. You can get into some severe health situations. Another important role of magnesium is its role as a cofactor of synthesizing steroids, right? Everybody knows about testosterone and estrogen, progesterone, pregnenolone, DHEA, and all of these steroids are required for the proper functioning of an organism. And without magnesium, we can't really properly synthesize, use the cholesterol. We can't really properly use the cholesterol and synthesize the steroids. So one of the first signs of magnesium deficiency, aside from elevated lactic acid, is elevated cholesterol. And that's because we can't properly use the cholesterol, and its levels build up. So several human trials actually have tried giving magnesium supplementation to people with elevated cholesterol, and their cholesterol levels drop on average by about 40%, 40. And one of the studies I remember actually said that magnesium is the body's endogenous statin molecule. So in other words, it has about the same effectiveness as your doctor putting you on Lipitor or Crestor or whatever other statin medicine is currently in love with. So you don't have to take these toxic drugs. You can resolve the issue. Actually, the proper way to resolve the issue is what magnesium does. It increases the conversion of cholesterol into downstream steroids, versus what the statins do, the pharma statins. They simply block the synthesis of cholesterol. But we need cholesterol. Without cholesterol, we can't function. We can't survive. So magnesium is actually that mineral that ensures, among other things like thyroid function and basically carbon dioxide, magnesium is the required cofactor for the proper usage of cholesterol. Another vital function of magnesium is that it is one of the body's endogenous inhibitory factors. So most cells, if they get into some kind of a trouble in terms of whether you have an infection, whether you have a chronic degenerative disease, or whether you have trauma, like you had an accident and you have a wound, almost actually all of these situations are characterized by the loss of magnesium and potassium, which happen to be so-called intracellular minerals. They usually are inside the cell, and then the cell accumulates calcium and sodium, and it takes them from the bloodstream. And the reason this happens is that basically the cell needs the calcium and sodium to increase cell division, to swell, to absorb water, to start dividing, which is what the basic, it's an attempt to repair whatever issue is there, like when it's an organ, when it's a wound, an infection, or whatnot. But what happens is if the cell takes up too much calcium, the cell actually dies through a process called excitotoxicity.
Mm-hmm.
So calcium is the main endogenous excitatory molecule, and its natural antagonist, the natural blocker of excessive calcium signaling, is magnesium. Magnesium is the body's endogenous natural calcium channel blocker. Calcium does most of these things to activate something called the calcium channels, and magnesium blocks these. So if you don't have enough magnesium, you cannot properly relax. People that are low on magnesium cannot have good restorative long sleep. They're always waking up. They maybe sleep 1 hour or two, but then they wake up, and basically even if they sleep, the sleep is feels like a bit of a slumber. You wake up and you feel like you just had like a the previous day had like a 3-hour session of lacrosse or American football, and linebackers were like crashing into you for the whole 3 hours. You feel really beat up, and one of the reasons you can't recover is because the cells are overwhelmed with calcium, and without the magnesium they can't properly relax.
Mm-hmm.
And another probably even more important characteristic of magnesium is that magnesium actually is always bound inside the body to the molecule ATP. So if you don't have enough magnesium, or you don't have enough ATP, like you can use one without the other. And if you're losing magnesium, first of all, you can't synthesize ATP. And second of all, you synthesize, but it's not enough. And it's usually done through a very inefficient method called glycolysis. So without magnesium, you're stuck in glycolysis instead of doing the full oxidative phosphorylation process that we discussed in one of the previous podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
And then basically you synthesize insufficient amounts of ATP, and you're doing it very inefficiently. And second, without magnesium, you can transport this ATP and send it around the body and the tissues where it is needed. So really, magnesium is this remarkable nutrient. And the problem with it is that, first of all, two big problems. One, most people don't get enough. Most of the foods that we eat, the commercial foods, have been deliberately depleted of magnesium. And unlike the FDA has some regulations of enriching commercial foods with certain nutrients, and I think there are federal regulations requiring the commercial foods to have additional vitamin B1, known as thiamine, vitamin B2, known as riboflavin, iron, right? Vitamin B6, but there's no such requirement for magnesium. So you can actually, most of the commercial foods that we eat are truly depleted of magnesium. Also, magnesium used to be present in the tap water in most cities across the United States. But that changed around the 1950s when regulation was passed that all of these trace minerals were removed. And some people think that the regulation was actually spearheaded by pharma, because tap water and most of the well water, which is what most of the small cities and towns around the country rely upon for the municipal water supply, they actually had trace levels of lithium and basically magnesium, actually pretty good amounts, potassium. So because lithium was becoming an actual pharmaceutical drug, big pharma lobbied that all of these trace minerals, not just lithium, but all of them were actually filtered out of the water. So if an average person goes out and just eats whatever food is available commercially and drinks tap water, over time they will likely become magnesium deficient. There's simply not enough magnesium in the commercialized food and in the tap water supply. Now, if you eat more raw, unprocessed foods, the kind of food that you likely to find on the farm, you're in a much better shape.
Mhm.
But not many people know that. I mean, so some of the great sources of magnesium are green leafy vegetables because they contain a molecule called chlorophyll, and chlorophyll is very similar to our endogenous molecule called hemoglobin. It's the
Mhm.
molecule that carries oxygen. So they're almost the same molecule, but in the core of the molecule, the chlorophyll contains magnesium and the hemoglobin contains iron. So a great source of magnesium is the chlorophyll from green leafy vegetables. But in order for it to be utilizable, in order for our body to be able to make use of it, they have to be well cooked. So that the chlorophyll molecule has to undergo processing in order to be, I mean, you'll absorb it, but you won't be able to properly break it down and use the magnesium unless those leafy greens have been well cooked. So that's one great source of magnesium. Um, Coffee actually is another great source of magnesium.
Yay.
Milk, which is taken directly from the farm and hasn't undergone any filtering. Um, Commercial milk undergoes filtering by law, by design.
Mhm.
And I think magnesium has been shown to be almost non-existent in commercial milk, yet the calcium stays. So if you're drinking commercial milk, you're exacerbating the situation even more. I mean, milk is already pretty high on calcium, but it naturally does come with a decent amount of magnesium. So if you're drinking milk from a farm, from a pasture-raised animal that hasn't undergone any processing except maybe pasteurization, you'll be getting a decent amount of magnesium. But most of the commercial brands have been tested and they show almost non-existent amount of magnesium in them. So magnesium supplementation becomes vital for almost everybody who lives in the modern world. And if the situation with the depleted food wasn't already bad enough, stress depletes magnesium. I mean, anytime we break down ATP, and that's what happens when you're under stress, you break down ATP into ADP. Anytime that happens and the levels of ATP drop, then you lose the magnesium because in order for magnesium to be retained, it needs ATP. If you don't have enough ATP to bind the magnesium and carry it around the body and give it to the cells that need it, that magnesium will be excreted, and the body happens to lose magnesium pretty well. Actually, most metals that end up in the bloodstream and that are not bound to a protein or a carrier like ATP, they will get excreted pretty easily. Magnesium is no exception. So stress and eating depleted food are probably the two cardinal reasons for a chronic magnesium deficiency that at this point is estimated that at least 40% of the American adults have chronic magnesium deficiency. And keep in mind that the FDA defines chronic magnesium deficiency according to rules that were developed in the early 20th century and were based on how little magnesium you need in order to survive basically in a prison. So really the guidelines for what magnesium levels should be are based off of a very stressed population where the requirement for that population wasn't health, it was actually just mere survival. So if 40% don't even meet that, so in other words, 40% of the American population are in a situation worse than federal prisoners in the
Oh
1920s.
gosh.
Now, if you actually modify these requirements a little bit, in other words, if you make the requirement to be health instead of mere survival, then I think you will quickly reach the 80s and probably even 90% of the American population suffering from chronic magnesium deficiency.
Okay, well, drop the mic because you answered like 16 of my questions in one felt swoop. So that was amazing. That was a lot of information. But that's what I was talking about is there's so much that goes into magnesium. And I want to go back to what you were saying about statins because I think it would be really cool if people would try a good dose of a quality magnesium before going on a statin, because you don't have a statin deficiency when you show up as having, the wrong kind of cholesterol or your doctor's not happy about your cholesterol. You could have a magnesium deficiency. And it's similar to things like with sleep and with, anxiety and things like that. It may not be that you have a Prozac deficiency or a Ambien deficiency. You actually might just have a magnesium deficiency. And when you were talking about foods, like I was really interested to
Yeah,
hear.
I forgot to mention another role of magnesium is
No,
that it actually acts similar uh, to the neurotransmitter GABA in the brain. And GABA is the main inhibitor in neurotransmitters. So if you're deficient in magnesium, in addition to having elevated lactic acid levels in the brain, which is known to cause anxiety. It's known to cause a number of different psychiatric problems. You will also have a deficiency of GABA signaling. And without GABA, GABA is another inhibitory / relaxation neurotransmitter. And without magnesium, you will be in a chronic state of functional GABA deficiency.
Okay.
So people that have proven magnesium deficiency, for example, alcoholics, chronic alcoholics, or people who take magnesium depleting drugs, they're known to suffer from a number of psychiatric conditions. And when their magnesium levels get replenished, these conditions immediately disappear. One major psychiatric condition is clinical depression. People with magnesium deficiency are known to be almost always clinically depressed. There are several human trials, for which I will also send you the study afterwards, showing that as little as 300 milligrams magnesium a day actually cure treatment-resistant depression. In other words, doctors had already given up on these patients. I mean, if you have treatment-resistant depression, you have really only one option, actually two. FDA recently approved something called Transcranial magnetic stimulation, and it amounts to wearing this hat with electrodes and sending these weak electrical impulses to your brain. And then your last option, really, if you're really treatment resistant, is basically getting electroconvulsive therapy, which is still in use. And you don't want to end up in that situation, because many people have read One Flight Over Cuckoo's Nest, right? It's known what this electroconvulsive therapy can do. If done chronically or if done incorrectly, you don't get a big margin for error there. I mean, if they use the wrong current or the wrong voltage, even by a small margin, for lack of a better expression, they may fry your brain and make the situation dramatically worse. One of the known side effects of electroconvulsive therapy, even when it works, even when your depression is cured, is chronic dementia. So you replaced one condition with another. You cured your depression, but now you're basically demented. So I really don't think it's reserved only for suicidal cases, for people that are truly treatment resistant. But these studies with humans, and there's more than one, I think it's 3 total that I've seen so far, they show that something as simple and actually low dosage, 300 milligrams magnesium daily, cured the depression in just 2 weeks. 2 weeks. No psychiatric drug on the market is known to work that quickly for a condition so severe. Yet magnesium works like a miracle. So I think this really underscores just how important magnesium is, and just how deficient most of us are. Because there have been also studies with people who don't have depression, don't have really any officially diagnosed condition, yet when they were given an IV drip of magnesium, they instantly felt better. They felt like they were with it, right? They didn't feel out of it. They didn't have forgetfulness. They didn't have irritability. They didn't have mood problems. They didn't have depression. They finally felt like being, their original self, the way they felt in high school is the expression. And it just shows you just how monumentally important magnesium is for our body, and just how pervasive the deficiency of it is. And sadly enough, FDA isn't likely to change its stance anytime soon on magnesium. It will keep the requirement for enriching with vitamins, but it's not going to, people have already asked the FDA, and FDA has said that not enough evidence exists to prove that enriching the food supply with magnesium will be beneficial. So don't expect this to change anytime soon, which means we have to rely on getting our own quality food or our own quality supplements in order to replenish our magnesium stores.
Okay, so I want to tell you, like, when I started taking magnesium, it drastically was one of the few things that it ever worked for, like, chronic anxiety. Like someone who's an overthinker and an overanalyzer and your brain is always on, magnesium is so key for that, because that's what really had helped transform my thinking into like, oh, calm thinking, because it is a calming mineral. Side note too, if you hear like babies screaming, it's not my kid. I'm at a coffee shop because I don't have Wi-Fi at my house. So if you hear babies screaming in the background, I don't know who that is. So, but I was going to say, as far as like the foods you were mentioning that were high in magnesium, are there foods, because I was under the impression that there are foods that are anti-nutrients, which actually pull more magnesium out of your body, such as things like wheat. What do you think about that?
Yeah, most grains are actually probably high on the list of foods that may if they don't cause a magnesium deficiency, they will probably exacerbate an already existing one at the very least. And grains are very high on the list. Some of the legumes, like lentils, which is one of the few legumes that I would consider eating myself, only if it's well cooked, are actually a pretty good source of magnesium.
Okay.
And it has been shown that people that combine lentils with a grain, actually they don't get into this situation of magnesium deficiency, or at the very least they don't exhibit the symptoms of it. So if you're going to eat grains, I mean, it's good to combine with lentils, not only for the magnesium supplementation point, but also because grains and legumes combined basically give you a full protein, contain all of the essential amino acids. And I would actually avoid eating grains if possible. But if it's an old-fashioned made bread that was allowed to rise slowly, sourdough bread, things like that, these are not as bad. But even those tend to exacerbate the magnesium deficiency simply because they don't contain enough, and just like you said, they tend to kind of chelate it and help the body excrete. So aside from the supplementation, lentils will probably help. Green leafy vegetables, coffee is a great source. And actually, organ meats are a good source. The liver is a great source. I think spleen, kidneys is a great source, and tongue. So those are the organs that I know have a decent amount of magnesium in them. And aside from that, you can try some high mineral content spring water. There are a number of different brands out there that are known to be high on the mineral content, and you can actually search. I think there are websites out there where you can isolate and say, give me the water that's highest in this mineral, right? And then you can select magnesium, and then it should give you like the commercially available brands that are being sold right now that have the highest magnesium content. And because magnesium in solution exists in ionic form, it's much better absorbable. And often actually it exists in the form of magnesium bicarbonate. So you'll be getting both the benefits of magnesium and of increased carbon dioxide by drinking this mineral water that's high on magnesium bicarbonate.
I love me some mineral water, some sparkling mineral water like Mountain Valley and Gerolsteiner. That's one of my favorite things. And it's an easy way to add some magnesium. And so is like sea salt. So talk about, how we should be flavoring our food with sea salt versus table salt.
Yeah, I think sea salt, you have to be careful because some sea salt may be contaminated with heavy metals, but you can actually get the certificate of analysis from the vendor, and it will show you the contents. And some sea salt may be high on things like lead, cadmium, and arsenic. You don't want these things, but the vendor should be able to provide a certificate of analysis. And if the salt is clean, then yes, usually sea salt is higher on mineral content than just a plain table salt we get that only contains sodium chloride.
Awesome. So you talked about the roles of magnesium, and there are so many in the body. And then you mentioned, one symptom could be something like poor sleep and cholesterol, but can you talk about more symptoms that are maybe lesser known that people might be experiencing and they may not even realize it's a magnesium deficiency?
Well, heavy periods, painful periods for women, infertility for both males and females, really anything related to energetic deficiency. I mean, basically the inability to relax, just like you said, rumination, constant rumination, this state of constantly having arguments in your head with other people, or like imagining yourself, if somebody who irritates you, instead of sort of forgetting about it, depending on how severe it is, of course, if you have a big fight, it may take some time to relax. But if you find yourself unable to move on from that moment and continuously reimagining it and kind of fighting in your head with that other person, that all of these things are potentially signs of magnesium deficiency. Without magnesium, you can't relax, you can't produce enough energy, and ultimately the ability to relax, the ability to deal with problems and challenges depends on energy, and magnesium is a vital required cofactor for that. If you don't have magnesium, then you may load up on all the thyroid you want, yet still be unable to generate a sufficient energetic response to the challenges that come from the external world.
Yeah, that's something that I think more people need to be made aware of, because there are so many people fighting that chronic feeling of I can't come down. I can't relax. I can't calm down. I can't sleep at night. So something as simple as adding magnesium in, and a good quality, is key too. We're going to talk about that. But would you say like our technology, like our exposure to Wi-Fi and blue light, I mean, does that have anything to do with a magnesium deficiency? Should people be concerned about that?
Absolutely. So after about 3 decades of denying that the electromagnetic frequency has any observable, any measurable, any objective health effect on humans, the FDA, actually the National Institutes of Health, which is part of the whole cascade, FDA and National Institute of Health are both subdivisions of the Department of Health and Human Services. So NIH published a report last year, actually 2 reports, and it says there's finally clear evidence that chronic exposure to EMF, electromagnetic frequency, is carcinogenic.
Mm-hmm.
And after 3 decades of claiming that there is no known mechanism through which EMF affects the human body other than heating it up, it turned out that electromagnetic frequency activates the calcium channels. So it acts like calcium in the body, like an excess of calcium. So basically, it is an excitotoxic factor in our lives. And this means that we need magnesium to balance that. So the higher the exposure to EMF, the higher the excitotoxicity for the cells, the higher the requirements for magnesium. So if you are constantly surrounded by a strong field of EMF, chances are that will eventually result in a magnesium deficiency, simply because it ups the requirements for magnesium so much, and yet the intake, whether from food or drink or supplements, is not nearly enough to match that. So yeah, absolutely. Chronic exposure to EMF is similar to any other chronic stress, because any stress is interpreted by the organism as a challenge. You either respond properly to it or you succumb to it. In order to respond properly to it, you need the energetic response. And after you respond to the challenge, you need the magnesium to calm down. Actually, you need the magnesium for both. You need it for the response because magnesium is a required cofactor for the energy production, and then you also need additional magnesium afterwards to basically wind down, to calm down.
So to that effect, it's almost like we need to really get a good dosage of magnesium just to handle the stressors of like being on a computer all day, or being on our smartphone, or being around Wi-Fi and stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah, I would definitely. Most doctors who actually work with magnesium at this point are convinced that we have a chronic magnesium deficiency, like a population-wide one, and that all this technology we're surrounded with, it's not making it any better. Another factor which many people don't even think about is fluorescent lights. Blue light, unlike red light, is a metabolic suppressor. So a response of the body to chronic exposure to blue light is to try to ramp up metabolism. Also, blue light acts similar to calcium, just as electromagnetic frequency, and is also excitotoxic. So that's yet another factor in our lives that increases the requirements of magnesium. And guess what? Most people that work in an office building, they're bathing in fluorescent lights. That I think the incandescent bulbs at this point have been banned by most states in a commercial setting because they're a fire hazard, right? Unlike the fluorescent lights. But that has an impact on our health. And so far, I haven't seen any politician seriously talk about the issue with fluorescent light, and it's so ubiquitous. It's everywhere. Hospitals, offices, even apartment buildings, because it's so cheap and consumes less energy. So apartment buildings are full of it.
Wow. And then there's so many different forms of magnesium on the market. So let's discuss those, because you can go into Walmart or any other big store, big corporate store, and buy like a magnesium oxide, but yet you're pretty much just peeing your money away when you do that, because it's not really absorbable. So talk about some of the more absorbable ones, and then you actually have a form of magnesium on your Idea Lab store that I want to talk about too.
Usually the salts, and especially the ionic magnesium, which I said, the magnesium in a solution, tends to be more absorbable than basically like magnesium oxide. So there are two factors here. First, what kind of salt are you going to use? Because the type of salt determines how much elemental magnesium is inside. Magnesium oxide is preferred as a supplement by most vendors, is because they get to advertise to you that it's really high in magnesium. 40% of magnesium oxide is actually pure magnesium, elemental magnesium. But guess what? It's actually one of the least absorbable forms. So it's the amount of magnesium in the supplement plus the absorption, and you have to, these kind of go against each other a little bit. There's a trade-off. That's what determines ultimately what a good magnesium supplement is. So magnesium oxide is high on the scale of how much magnesium it has, but it's very low on the scale of absorption.
Okay.
So its overall effect is probably not very beneficial, but it's very cheap. And many people like that because, you know, they don't want to spend too much on supplements. Doctors love it because they like to prescribe, you know, whatever is commonly available and whatever has been in the commercial supply for long enough that they feel safe, legally safe about it. And hospitals have magnesium oxide as a solution to give you as an IV. So if you're going to get an IV, then the salt of the magnesium doesn't really matter. It goes directly into your bloodstream.
Okay.
But if you're going to be taking it orally, then the salt does matter. The type of magnesium does matter. Again, magnesium oxide, not very absorbable. Magnesium carbonate is better, but it's hard to find. It doesn't have as much magnesium, elemental magnesium, as the oxide, but it tends to absorb better and also provides you with carbonate, which ultimately results in increasing carbon dioxide levels in the body, which is a benefit that we discussed in a previous podcast. Magnesium gluconate is a great form because it's magnesium bound with gluconic acid, which is similar to sugar, right? And let's say magnesium sulfate is a very common supplement. It's used for baths. So many people who, like, you know, basically want to have a relaxing bath, they will fill the bathtub with water and they'll dump probably a full packet of magnesium salts, but that's magnesium sulfate. The Epsom salts, exactly. But it's not very absorbable orally, and basically, but magnesium tends to irritate the gastrointestinal tract. So very few magnesium supplements taken orally, even if they absorb, are actually pleasant. I mean, most people don't associate taking magnesium as, you know, they don't see it as a pleasant experience, and really for most magnesium type of supplements it is not. Even when it absorbs, sometimes it may cause loose stools and diarrhea and whatnot, and even when it doesn't, it can cause stomach cramps, nausea, for some people even vomiting, depending on how much they take. So in general, it's hard to get a good absorbable supplement, and it's even harder to get a supplement that actually doesn't irritate your gastrointestinal tract. So the way medicine has gotten around this is that if you go to the hospital, they don't even bother giving you something to take orally. They just hook you up on an IV, because then they can use whatever cheap version they can get. They'll still charge you an arm and a leg, but to the hospital the cost will be low because they will probably choose magnesium oxide. But it goes directly to your bloodstream, and it doesn't cause the same irritation to the GI tract. And also some people that are in the hospital, they're about to get a procedure done, like surgery and whatnot, and they're not allowed to eat anyways. So the IV really resolves all of these issues. So what do you do, short of going to the hospital or paying a doctor to concoct an imaginary condition and say this person needs an IV and we're going to put magnesium in it? Short of doing that, which is obviously not an option for everybody, what can we do? Well, magnesium carbonate, magnesium gluconate are great options. Magnesium bicarbonate is something people can do at home. They can create their own. It's called, the common name for it is magnesium water. So if you go to Google and type magnesium bicarbonate recipe, you'll get a bunch of different videos, and you can make this very cheaply. All you do is you go to your local CVS, Rite Aid, Walgreens, whatnot, and you buy a bottle of something called milk of magnesia. It's usually sold as either a laxative or an anti-acid medication. It's this creamy white substance, and you get a full bottle of it, and the recipe is very simple. You fill the cap, which is usually 45 milliliters of size. You take one cap, so 45 milliliters of milk of magnesia, and then you buy a bottle that contains 1 quart of carbonated water. It can be flavored, unflavored, it can have sugar in it, it doesn't matter. So you open slowly the bottle, and then you slowly pour the milk of magnesia inside that is 1 quart of liquid. You close the lid, and you start shaking. And maybe people will be like, oh, why would you shake carbonated water? Well, guess what? The carbonic acid in the carbonated water will react with the magnesium base, which is magnesium hydroxide. That's what magnesia is. And then when they combine, that carbon dioxide will disappear, and then the result will be water with magnesium bicarbonate dissolved in it. And then the way you know it is basically you keep shaking the bottle until the cloudiness of this white milky substance disappears, which means the reaction is fully complete. And you'll notice that the bottle will shrink a little bit, which to many people will be very surprising, because you would expect shaking a bottle of carbonated beverage to actually make the bottle really hard and ready to explode. You won't. Actually, you react, and actually the bottle will shrink. That's another sign that the reaction is complete. And then you basically have 1 liter of milk of magnesia, and taking, I think taking 1 glass will give you, I think, about 200 milligrams of elemental magnesium.
Okay.
So you can use that bottle of water, that 1 quart should be enough to last you for 4 days.
Wow.
If you take 1 glass a day. That's about as cheap as it gets.
Yeah.
But it becomes cumbersome. I try to do it. It becomes cumbersome, and over time you just sort of get tired of it. And also, it's not nasty tasting, but it's not a great taste either.
That's what I was thinking. Doesn't sound real appetizing, but yeah, the things we'll do for good health.
Exactly. That's why some people choose some flavored water. So if you get some water that's got like a fruity flavor, it's actually makes it okay. It's never pleasant, but it's never really bad either. So it's tolerable, right? But many people be like, well, why should I go through this? Because it really, if anything gets to the point of being, not pleasant, over time, this is a recipe for people dropping it. I mean,
right.
we just like pleasant things, right? There's nothing wrong with it. So what can we do? Well, as it turns out, you can actually administer magnesium transdermally.
Yeah.
And that is a very good balance, very good trade-off between getting stuck with a needle and drinking a, semi-pleasantly tasting liquid, which also takes time and money and effort to make. Yeah. So we have a product, we call it Magnoil, because it's an oily substance, and it's a magnesium salt dissolved with the DMSO. And then what you do is you rub it on your skin, really anywhere on the body, and it has close to 100% absorption. So it's basically almost the same effectiveness as the needle, with all of the systemic effects and everything else that intravenous magnesium provides, without the irritation of the GI tract, without the bowel movements, without the nausea, without the stomach cramps, and most importantly, without the just as importantly, without the nasty taste, and without the having to make this preparation every 3 or 4 days. So we have a supplement, and also because DMSO is used. If you Google for DMSO and joint problems, you'll see that it's a remedy that's been used for close to a century for all kinds of joint problems, and to this day, it's really a staple for anybody who has horses. Race horses, before and after a race, they get all of their joints get slathered with DMSO, because it prevents the inflammation that comes with chronic running, and horses do run very intensely and also for long periods of time. Well, something similar happens to humans. Over time, we all become arthritic, our joints hurt, they crack. Some people get rheumatoid arthritis, which is really painful, their joints swell. Well, rubbing DMSO on the joints, especially in combination with magnesium, turns out to be really helpful. Both of these are potent anti-inflammatories, and as it turns out, swelling is due to a retention of water. Magnesium, being one of the salts, actually helps the body expel this extra water, and the swollen area shrinks. So I've seen people with rheumatoid arthritis whose knees swell, and they start looking like melons. When they rub our magnesium dissolved in DMSO, their joints return to normal within 30 minutes. Now, not a cure, right? But if it is a remedy, and it's also a great way to increase your basically systemic stores of magnesium. It doesn't help only the joints, but you can rub it anywhere. And if you rub it on the joints, you'll get the benefit of both better joint health and increasing, basically supplementing with magnesium for the entire body. So that's how I mentioned.
So something else about DMSO that I never knew until I started using your product that had DMSO in it is that it helps with cellulite, and it also helps with wrinkles. It helps with skin health. I started even applying the Magna oil, your actual product, to my face. And so I was like noticing that the little tiny fine lines I was getting around my eyes, I was like, okay, those are gone. So there is something to the DMSO with regard to wrinkles as well, yes?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, DMSO has a known cell protective effect. In cryotherapy, which is freezing cells, like getting cells to be at a temperature that's close to the absolute freezing point, as some people know, very rich people that die, they like to be frozen with the hope
Mm-hmm.
that in the future they will get revived. Well, the problem with freezing a living organism is that water expands when it freezes. So because cells contain so much water, this expansion causes the cells to burst. So clearly, just taking an organism and freezing it, it's not going to retain the original shape of the organism. I mean, the organism will essentially burst, right? And that's okay with meat and veggies and fruits because we consume them. But you can notice, like if you take a frozen strawberry, right? If you take a strawberry out of the garden, it's really nice and firm. If you put it in the freezer and let it freeze, and then take it out and let it thaw, then that strawberry will become a mush. You know, actually, you'll collapse because the cellular structure is gone. All these cells that were filled with water, they've bursted, and then basically all of their infrastructure is now damaged, and the strawberry can no longer maintain its shape.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the same thing happens with any tissue that contains living cells. And they found out about 50 years ago, then basically providing these cells, bathing them in a medium of DMSO, allowed these cells to be frozen to close to the absolute zero temperature without the cells bursting. So now basically they can actually completely freeze a whole animal by pumping it full with an intravenous DMSO, and then the animal stays frozen for as long as the researchers want, and then they thaw the animal back, and the animal doesn't collapse, doesn't turn into mashed potatoes. It basically maintains its original structure. So this shows you that DMSO has some kind of a structure protecting effect, which is really important because structure and function are interdependent, and
Mm-hmm.
without one you can't have the other. So anything that preserves the structure of the cell, it's beneficial. And you can think of cellulite, you can think of wrinkles as essentially local collapse of cellular structure,
Mm-hmm.
and then the cells can no longer maintain their elasticity, can no longer maintain this matrix, which allows them to expand and contract on demand as needed. So basically, a portion of the cells, a layer of the cells there has collapsed, and that's what forms this collapsed tissue, which from the outside looks like a wrinkle. So that's probably one way the DMSO helps. DMSO has also been shown that when applied in lower concentrations, which is similar to what we have in our product, it
Right.
increases the production of energy in the cell. And that's
Mm-hmm.
the function part. So I already talked about the structure, that's also the function. So DMSO improves the function of the cell, and the most important function of the cell is producing energy. So DMSO seems to address both of these fundamental aspects of cellular health in a manner that few other compounds are known to do. Most of the other compounds usually address only one or the other aspects. The only other chemicals that I know that are similar to DMSO that address both are things like progesterone, DHEA, pregnenolone, thyroid hormone, and maybe aspirin. But they're literally, you can count them on one hand, and DMSO is one such component.
Well, yeah, I just love the fact too that it actually gets the magnesium into the skin, because there are a lot of topical magnesiums out there that I didn't feel the benefit with as much as I do with Magna oil. So your version is a lipodate. Can you talk about that? Because I had never heard that before I read what form of magnesium was in your product.
Yeah, so it's pedolate. So basically,
Oh,
magnesium
pedalate.
pedolate.
Okay, yeah.
Yes. So it's a salt of magnesium with something called pyroglutamic acid, and pyroglutamic acid is a very interesting chemical. It is structurally similar to the inhibitory neurotransmitter GABA,
Mm-hmm.
gamma butyric acid,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's sold in some countries. It's actually sold as a so-called nootropic. In other words, studies have determined that pyroglutamic acid improves the function of the brain, improves cognitive function, improves memory, improves mood, and there are derivatives of pyroglutamic acid which are known brain drugs, and they're called the racetams. There's
Right.
piracetam, oxiracetam. Yeah, they're all derivatives of pyroglutamic acid.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the mechanisms to which the pyroglutamic acid probably improves brain health is that it's shown that in lower doses, similar to the ones found in our magnesium supplement, it actually increases the synthesis of dopamine. And dopamine is truly the neurotransmitter responsible for things like mood, for memory function, for sexual function, in general, for enjoying life. If your dopamine is low, you feel dull, you get irritable very easily, you're not interested in things, you kind of look for routine because new things annoy you, they irritate you, they're overwhelming. Kind of sounds like pretty much everybody who comes back after a long day of work. That's precisely because we're low on dopamine and we're higher on serotonin. But pyroglutamic acid seems to be able to reverse that process, and it has a great synergy with magnesium, right? Magnesium props the energy levels, and pyroglutamic acid takes care of dopamine. So that may be another reason why people feel so upbeat when using our product.
Yeah, and it definitely does help with sleep too, because I always apply it before I go to bed. And on nights that I have missed it, or I've been out of town and didn't have it with me, that was when I didn't sleep as well. So I noticed a difference when I take it and versus when I don't, not only like with my skin, but also with my sleep and with my anxiety and stuff like that. So I really love that for being one of the best forms of magnesium I've ever taken. So how can people find, and it's called Magna Oil, or am I pronouncing it wrong?
You can call it Magna Oil. It's actually spelled Magna Oil without the A. It's
Right.
Magnoil, but many people call it Magna Oil as well. But I think it's pretty clear where it's coming from magnesium and oil.
Yes.
But by the way, there's no oil in it. It actually just feels like an oily substance because the pyroglutamic acid, when it's dissolved in the DMSO, it makes it a little bit viscous. But don't worry about it. When you apply it to your skin, it will feel a little sticky, but it won't be oily.
Right.
And within a minute or two, will actually fully absorb. And after that, you can apply any
soft.
clothing. You can put any clothing on top of it. Yes.
Yeah, it's
and
very
then the
soft.
Skin
Your skin is very soft.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right after it dries, it'll be super soft. Yeah.
So yeah, even though it has oil in the name, don't worry. It's not going to leave any oil stains on your clothes or on your skin.
Yeah, and they can find that by how?
They go through a main website of our company, which is Idea Labs, one word, Idea Labs, and then DC, because we're based in DC. IdeaLabsDC.com. It's there. The products are arranged by alphabetical order. I think it's like the second or third row from the top, and it's quite easy to order.
Yeah, and I'll put a picture of it in our podcast here, and I'll also put a link into it so they can see it too. Georgi, this is awesome, as usual. I love learning about all the variances of health with you, but also learning how there's actual products out there like yours that do what they say they're supposed to do, and that's what I appreciate. That's why I wanted to kind of show people your products, is that this is the first, everything that I've used from Idea Labs does exactly what it says it's going to do. So I appreciate that about your stuff.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and I appreciate you too. So we'll be back with more. Thank you for watching. And thanks again, Georgi, for being here. And we'll talk soon, okay?
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
Okay, bye.
It's great talking to you.
You too. Bye-bye. Hey out there, I'm about to drop one more bit of knowledge about why you should drop an F-bomb. So I have ripped open a packet of coconut oil here, but I'm not going to eat it. I am going to use it as a little natural moisturizer. So you know how when you travel you don't want to take a whole lot, especially nowadays they only let you take a carry-on. And maybe you're just going away for the weekend and you need some moisturizer, you need some sunscreen to take with you. Well, guess what? Coconut oil is kind of nature's sunscreen. So you pack one of these little bad boys with you, and not only can you eat it, but you can put it on your skin. And it's nature's best sunscreen because it's a natural way to protect from the sun in a low-grade way, so you can stay out all day, get a little color, but not get burnt. Also, maybe after the gym you want to moisturize and then head to work, you can use this. Maybe you need to get a little dryness out of your hair. This is a wonderful way to saturate the hair and really soothe the hair. Pour it all over your head, let it sit with a shower cap for a couple hours, and then rinse it out and wash it, and you're gonna have really soft, silky hair. And your scalp will be soothed too. If you have kind of itchy scalp, coconut oil is great for that. There are so many great reasons to have a packet of coconut oil with you, not just for eating, but also for body and skincare purposes. Works great as a face oil and a body oil. So check out dropandfbomb.com and get some of these handy dandy little packets to keep with you. Even if you're not into eating it, you're going to find it really beneficial to just take on the go with you. Oh, also, you can use my code GETFIT, GETFIT, to save 20%. Thanks for watching.